It's good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy, Miirym. Back with Hometown Commander, back for another episode of $50 Upgrades, the show where I give you my proposed $50 upgrades for the Precon in front of us. And today, we're talking about the Temur Roar Tarkir Dragonstorm Precon, headed by Eshki Temur's Roar. The deck list is going to be down in the description for you below, as well as I'd really appreciate if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, do all that YouTube stuff. I appreciate it. Eshki Temur's Roar is a 3-mana 2/2 human warrior. This is whenever you cast a creature spell, you put a counter on Eshki. If its power is 4 or greater, you draw a card. And if its power is 6 or greater, it deals damage equal to Eshki's power to each opponent. Eshki is such an interesting commander for a lot of ways because she pays off basically doing most of what you want to do, growing herself. Drawing on power 4 is a very prevalent ability across dark colors, and so you're going to get that. And then dealing damage to each opponent is really fun, and it's something we can also pay off. With the $50 and this being a deck that cares about dragons, we pretty quickly had to decide what dragons we were going to put in the deck, right? There are dragons like Old Gnawbone that would be near impossible to put in this deck with this upgrade tier because you'd basically be spending your entire upgrade on it. So I had to sit down and really decide what I thought was the best use of the actual dragons we're heading to it, and what was the best use of the utility pieces. And I hope that as I explain them to you, you'll understand what I was trying to accomplish. I'd like to say a quick thank you to the channel members. If you're interested in seeing all of our videos early for just $1 a month, consider checking it out below the video. So I think what my thought process going into the additions here were grab some value pieces, grab some consistency pieces, and then add a few dragons I think are worth their cost but still fun. So first off, I added Blast-Furnace Hellkite. This is a pretty expensive dragon, and I think for a lot of people they may shut off as soon as they see that it's 9 mana and doesn't target Eshki's third ability. But what I think Blast-Furnace Hellkite does for us is a very similar thing that Atarka does for us in the Precon, which is giving all of our creatures double strike. Now the difference between Atarka and Blast-Furnace is that Blast-Furnace doesn't just give our creatures double strike, it gives all creatures attacking our opponents double strike. This is a very interesting ability. It's always interesting when they give this to anything attacking an opponent, and not just ours. I can see why you wouldn't like Blast-Furnace, but I think it's an interesting dragon, especially with all the haste we have access to in the deck. I think it's a fun attacker. Bloomvine Regent is just an example of adding the dragons from the main set that I think are well worth their cost. On its omen side, this is a Kadama's Reach that's just going to help you, going to help you ramp and throw it back in your deck. And then on its regular side, anytime a dragon comes in, you're gaining 3 life, which is really nice when we're trying to play dragons, and the life should help keep us alive, especially in this Precon scenario. Carnelian Orb of Dragonkind, there's a couple of the orbs that were in Baldur's Gate. Each of them tap for a color and have an extra ability if you use it to cast a dragon spell. Here we have a red one that gives it haste when it comes in. I like this ability a ton. I think it makes sense when you're playing these big dragons to start getting them in. We do have other ways to give them haste, but it's nice just to have another one, especially in the mid to late game, if you don't see those other haste neighbors just quite yet. Ganax is an example of a dragon that most time, no matter when you see it, it's really good. Whenever it or another dragon enters under your control, you make a treasure. So, of course, it's just more mana. It was better early game than late game, but I still think it's a great dragon. And the mana does help pay back some of the things. And if you start taking really long turns where you're cheating in multiple dragons with something like Dracogenesis, which we'll see is not in the set, but comes out in the main set if you're going that kind of route, you can start to see where treasures can become really important. But Garruk's Uprising is one of a couple of ways in the deck we can draw cards. This is whenever a creature you control with power 4 or greater comes in, you draw a card. Almost every dragon in our deck fulfills this, meaning we'll be drawing cards, refilling things in our hand right after Eshki does as well, right when we cast those. Herd Heirloom adds to tap a mana of any color to spend for a creature spell, and then we can give a creature with power 4 or greater trample, and whenever it hits somebody, draws a card. It's just an interesting ability. The second one, I think it's worth it. The Mana Rock is well worth it for a 3-color deck where we want to make sure we have all of our colors. But the card draw could matter, especially if you want to give it something like Eshki and have it start attacking, at a certain point and make sure that you're always getting through. We're throwing in the Jade Orb as well, very similar to Carnelian, except it's green. And if it's used for a dragon, it gets a counter and hexproof, so really nice to protect key dragons at the right time. We're playing another one of those mono dragons in Marang, River Regent. Its Omen side can have us draw 3 and pitch 1. And when it comes in, you bounce 2 non-land permanents back to the owner's hands. This can bounce our permanents if we want it to, but most of the time we're not going to. We're going to bounce our opponent's things. But again, I like it. 6 mana, triggers all of Eshki. That's a good one. I think there's kind of no reason not to bring in Miirym. It's a great commander in its own right, but I feel like it's a really great support piece for Eshki. Whenever another non-token dragon comes in, create a token that's copy of it, except it isn't legendary. This is just really nice because then you're getting double the bodies for every dragon you're casting. And you could start to really take advantage of having multiple copies of a creature, one of them not being legendary, if you wanted to care a little bit more about copying or bouncing or anything like that. If you're interested in the idea of doubling up dragons coming in, I think Miirym is a great commander in its own right. We'll be covering it next week on the channel. But I think Miirym's a great add for what the deck is trying to do. Monstrous Vortex is an enchantment that I think is just going to add some value. Whenever we cast a creature spell with power 5 or greater, we discover X, where X is that spell's mana value. You're going to exile cards until you hit a non-land card with mana value, with that mana value or less. We can cast it for free. If you don't cast it for free, you put it in your hand. I really like Monstrous Vortex. A lot of our dragons are going to fulfill that threshold. And when they do, hopefully we can either discover into another dragon or just discover into a value enchantments or something like that. This does happen on cast, meaning that hopefully, let's say I casted a creature and got into something like Rhythm of the Wild beside it. Rhythm Wild would come down first, and then I'd be able to get its benefit. Speaking of Rhythm of the Wild, it's just another way to give our creatures haste. Everything that's non-token comes in and gets Riot. It's choice of either a +1/+1 counter or haste, and our creature spells can't be countered. This is just going to make sure that creatures can come in hasty when we don't see our other things, and make sure they can hit right away. Scourge of Valkas is the second copy of the Dragon Tempest effect that's already in the Precon. Whenever a dragon enters, it deals X damage to any target where X is the number of dragons you control. The difference between Tempest and Scourge of Valkas is Tempest gives all of our dragons haste when they come in. Valkas doesn't. But technically, you could have 2 copies of that ability on the board at the same time, basically doubling that damage that's being put out by it. The nice thing about Scourge, really, is just having 2 copies of that in your deck at any time, right, to use. Uncivil Unrest kind of plays double duty, just like Rhythm of the Wild. It gives you options for your dragons to come in with a counter or haste. But it cares about Eshki, right? Because Eshki's going to be getting counters on it. So if a creature you control with a counter on it would deal damage to a permanent or player, double that damage instead. This is going to double every of those third Eshki triggers that goes off, doubling its power worth of damage out. And that can really help over the course of a game. And then Wrathful Red Dragon says whenever a dragon we control is dealt damage, we deal that much damage to any target that isn't a dragon. This can be used in a lot of ways, taking out key creatures, dealing damage to things like planeswalkers. I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can use that damage trigger, but the truth is, I think a lot of times it just helps deter your opponents from blocking your dragons as you're doing the things you want to do. I want to say a quick disclaimer as we go through our removals from the deck that I'm not saying that these are the strictly worst cards in the deck, or that they're not they're the exact cards you should take out. These are the cards that I chose to take out to make room for the cards that I put in. And I would say that if there's any of these cards that you are wondering why they were taken out and you want to put them back in your Precon. You don't have to listen to me. You don't have to exactly take out everything. But as we go through the removals, I will point out a few cards that I think should potentially come back in and why I think they should come back in. And my hope is that that may help guide you throughout your process on upgrading your Precon. Here, I like Dragonlord Atarka. I think it's a fun dragon, but the truth is we just have better dragons for the same mana cost. I get the point of having Atarka in the deck, right? Atarka is the genesis of the team or clan in the old storyline. Makes sense, but Atarka World Rend is just strictly better, and I think it makes more sense to play it over it. All 3 of these dragons, again, I like them, but we could just find better dragons for the cost. Pretty much the same thing here. Almost every dragon I cut, it was because it was like, we just have better dragons that we can play. I did go down a couple creatures as far as the count goes, but I think it's fine because we're playing more ways to draw through the deck and get into the things we want to get into. Thunderbreak Regent is probably one of the ones where I was like, man, that might actually make sense. Hurting opponents when they target our things seems like a really good ability. But I guess the question you have to ask yourself is, are you going to play the protection for your creatures, counter spells, hexproof spells, things like that? Or do you just want to play bigger dragons to hit hard? I think in bracket 2, we're just better off playing the better dragons. If you're going to try to take this tech up to level 3, you may end up adding a couple cheap counter spells and wanting to play a little bit more of them. But truthfully, as you get up towards level 3, you're playing more haste enablers, you're playing more ETB triggered things. I just think your protection on Eshki to me isn't as important once the dragons get going. Like, to me, I view Eshki as enabling the dragons versus being the reason the dragons are good. The dragons are good because they're very large flyers that are very difficult to deal with. It needs to be said that there aren't a lot of tribes in Magic that fly. And of all the tribes that do, dragons tend to be some of the biggest. I think there are some demons that on average might be larger than dragons. The difference is the dragons are just in the right sets of colors to ramp fast, have a lot of ways to interact with them, and have great abilities. In that lane, the other big flying tribe you're going to see that's going to probably hold its own is angels. Angels tend to be less strong in the sense that their power and toughness is not the same as dragons, but they get access to lifelink and making tokens, which can very quickly get themselves on par. So the truth is, you're towards the top of the food chain when it comes to flyers, and for that reason, you kind of get to get away with a little bit more of that evasion that I think makes Dragon decks so good and something we have to talk about. But what I wanted to add this time around, instead of just giving you my $50, was maybe some philosophy going forward of what you'd want to add next. On the screen, I have 3 dragons that I think all are well worth being in this deck, but their price tag alone probably would have just cut this upgrade video off at the kneecaps. Obviously, Gnawbone there at $47. Whenever a creature you control does combat damage to a player that make that many treasures is an insane line of text I still don't believe is actually on it. I've seen this card make 30 treasures in a turn, 20 treasures in a turn. And that much mana is really dangerous, especially in a deck which can start doling out as much damage as Eshki can if you give it enough creature cards and enough mana. The problem with all Gnawbone at the end of the day is it's one dragon. If you have no way to search it out and you don't have enough card draw, it's $50 in your deck that you will never see. But you'll notice as you get higher up on the power scale and playing better dragon decks, they have so much better draw and minimal search when they need it that Gnawbone looks a lot better because it's a $50 dragon among a deck of $20 to $40 dragons where it's not that big of a deal. Beside it are a set of 2 dragons. I think Twin Flame Tyrant makes more sense for the deck than Terror. Twin Flame says that if a source we control would deal damage to an opponent or permanent opponent controls, it deals double that damage instead. We're very good with Eshki, right? Slamming out its ability into our opponents. Terror is great. Deals damage when creatures come in. Of course, you got to have a lot of creatures coming in to make Terror worth it. So I think of the 3 of these, Twin Flame would be the one I would add first because it literally immediately works with Eshki, whereas Gnawbone is just very good. The second thing is, well, truthfully, lands. I thought Maelstrom was a whole lot more expensive when I originally brewed this. When I did this a little bit early, and Maelstrom's price ended up bottoming out a little bit lower than I expected it to, so Maelstrom's going to be a lot easier of an add. But the thing we have to acknowledge is that Precon mana bases are getting a lot better. If you buy an old Precon, some of their mana bases are just absolutely brutal, and by reprinting things like the check lands and the slow lands from Innistrad, some of these Precon bases are getting a whole lot more viable, especially in 3-color decks. So truthfully, you don't have to go get shocks and fetches. I think there's a lot of lands that work really well. My examples here are the Verge Cycle. These are the lands that have come out in Duskmourn and Aether Drift. They come in and tap for a color, and if you control land of either of the colors, then they can tap for the other color. They're just very useful. They effectively play a lot like a check land, and they're just going to help you with your consistency. Maelstrom's a very good land, and I think you should definitely put it in the deck. I thought it was about $8 when I brewed this up. At $150, it's an absolute no-brainer, and I think I would just pay the extra $150 to put it in. Just take out a temple if there are still any left in the deck. I think I took one out or that, and I think it's well worth the cost to do it. But let's see what we do in these videos best and get into our playtest. The goal of our playtest on the channel is not to find magical Christmas land. It's not to show off all our best plays and say how we'd win the game if we had 90 turns. The goal is to get in some game scenarios, understand how we would build our board, and how we work our game plan. So here, turn 1, we have a couple lands. We have a Sol Ring. Sol Ring is one of those cards that unfortunately has a stigma in our format, but it's very good at what it does, and I think in this scenario it's well worth not playing our tap land in Sheltered Thicket to get it down. Because truthfully, I don't think we get down to Eshki turn 2 anyway, right? But my thought here is now put the Shelter thing in and put this Dragon's Horde in. Now, every time we cast a dragon, we put a gold counter on it, and then we can remove a gold counter to draw a card. Now I would get Eshki down on turn 3, but now I have this extra mana, right? I can start using. And my thought here is to use the Omen side of Bloomvine Regent. So when you use the Omen side, you do the result, and then you shuffle it back in. So here it's effectively a Kadama's Reach. You're going to get a basic land down tapped and a basic land to hand. So I'll put a forest in, then I'll put an island to hand. I have 2 reds, that's 2 greens, and then this is going to go in the deck. We're going to shuffle. So we still have the opportunity to get it back later. We're just casting it for its spell side. That won't trigger, obviously, Eshki because it wasn't a creature spell. But now, 8 mana on turn 4, we're living pretty, right? There's a lot of things we can do. I like Thunderbreak Dragon. This is a dragon that lets you look at the top card of your library anytime and cast big dragons from the top. So we're going to put a counter in Eshki and then draw. And we see Kaiga, a blue dragon that when it dies, you gain control of a creature. But we've got 4 mana left. I guess I'll put something like the Thrasher in, get another counter in Eshki, draw again. Again, it's okay that we're not triggering that 6 cost every time. It's okay. We're going to draw it. We're going to do it eventually. But I think just getting these down and putting them down is going to be important for the purposes of getting our creatures in for future turns and really taking advantage of putting our pressure on the board of having a bunch of flyers. Here we see Hammerhead Tyrant. It's actually a dragon I really like. Whenever you cast future dragons or spells, whenever you cast future spells, you get to bounce things. This feels like something that's very worth casting off the top. And it actually gets haste. So I think it's worth doing. We cast it, right? Counter an Eshki, draw, deal 5 to everybody. This comes in with haste. And I'd probably tap it to leave a couple. I think it's probably 2 or 3 mana up. We could still leave this Chaos Warp up, just in case we get to attack there. The Thrasher could go off. Whenever one or more dragons we control deal damage to an opponent, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn, destroy an artifact they control, 4 damage to each other opponent, or exile the top and play it. Just pick the artifact or the damage. I think it doesn't really particularly matter, but remember, both these dragons could attack this turn. We could actually have gotten all 3 of them, potentially. Exiling off the top can be dangerous. Remember that it says you can only play it this turn. We basically tapped out to do it. Now, we do know what the top card of our deck is. It's a land, and we already played a land this turn, so I guess we could exile it and we'd be fine. But it's good to know that if you exile that card and you can't play it, it's gone, right? There's no way to get it back. Now, right, as we go to cast more spells, Hammerhead can start bouncing things, which is really nice, allowing us to kind of really punish our opponents. 9 mana is a lot of mana. There's a lot of things we can do with it. We're them all wild on the top, so we cannot cast that. I like the idea of Scourge the Throne. I like the idea of Atsushi. Do I have any 6s? I don't have any 6s to target at Eshki. If I draw a dragon, though, I get to draw the Rhythm of the Wild, and we'd see what's next. So I'd try Atsushi. That would get me a counter and draw the Rhythm of the Wild. Talisman on top. That would trigger this to bounce something. Get a counter there. So we got 4 mana left, and then the Horde. We could always tap the Horde to draw, see what's next, right, after the creativity. If I Rhythm here, I could tap the Horde to draw and just get the Talisman out of the way, and maybe we would see what's next. But I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mana, right? My thought was Rhythm, but I think there's a lot of other options. I mean, we could just do, we could do Rhythm and hold up Rapid Hybrid just in case, and then just go attacking with our dragons again, dealing out damage. And we don't mind exiling that Talisman because we got plenty of mana, right? We don't mind getting rid of it with that 3rd ability if all of our dragons do end up hitting. Now we see Kessig Wolfrun, which is our draw for turn. Now we have a mountain on, we have a forest on top. And then we can try to get some more dragons out. Again, Rhythm of the Wild can have them come in with haste. We could tap the Dragon's Horde to draw this forest. right? Remove a counter and tap into draw just to see if we can, hit something else. The nice part is we have lots of dragons in our hands, so if somebody wipes the board, we've got plenty more dragons to put down. We're not in a bad spot, and I think at this point, it's just a board wipe where we rule the board with our dragons, right? Let's get into playtest number 2, keeping a 2-lander with Herd Heirloom and a couple really big dragons. This is going to be a little dicey of a start, but I think it's good to see some dicey starts so that you understand what you look for. Here we have a Mosswort Bridge, which comes in. We look at the top 4. We pick one and exile it face down. And then on a future turn, as long as we have 10 or more power among creatures we control, we can play a green and play that card for free. So we can actually get a land with it as well. So my thought is, unless I draw an untapped land, does the Thicket make more sense? I think the Thicket might end up making more sense. Mosswort Valley into the Herd Heirloom, because the Herd Heirloom can get Eshki. And then I might as well just put the bridge in now. My thought is just to see what we can pull to, potentially get later. Love Temur. Oh, Blast-Furnace might end up being my choice. It's just so expensive. Temur Ascendancy, bottoming that really stinks. Great haste outlet. Great ability to draw. But I think it's just Eshki this turn, using the mana there, and there for all 3 of our colors. Getting into our next turn, we only have 1 blue source in the Herd Heirloom, which kind of stinks, but it's fine because we're really not worried about it, right? We got so many other dragons. I think I'll play the Wrathful here, get the counter on Eshki, draw the card, and have that come in. I think it's well worth our 5 mana. Here we draw Dragon Tempest, a great card, and Uncivil Unrest. So the question is, do we take... well, we can't exactly take the turn off because his mana can only be used to cast creatures. That's kind of a bummer. We could go Felethar or Felwar Stone plus Dragon Tempest, maybe attack with the Wrathful Red Dragon. Just try to build up some more mana for a future turn, because now on this turn, of course we draw the land, but that's 5, 6, 7 mana. So now we've got a lot more access at our disposal. I guess we'll play the Courser so we can get the damage here. Draw a card, deal the damage right when it comes in. With Eshki for 4. Now, if I had the extra mana, I could have gotten Blast-Furnace, but that's fine. This will come in and deal damage with the Dragon Tempest, and it'll get haste, so it'll be able to attack, which is really nice. That's the one thing that Tempest really does well, is giving the haste and dealing the damage with its abilities. And then as we come to our next turn, I think I would just tap to the Hellkite. It's going to come in with haste. Then I guess cast the Scourge, counter, draw. It comes in dealing damage as well because of the Tempest. And I've got just 2 mana left, so I can't get Miirym down. I could leave up something like Rapid Hybrid with something like the Felwar Stone if I tapped it instead and left Command Tower up. But then these all get to attack, right? They're getting in, they have double strike, they're dealing damage. Scourge of the Throne can get you another combat as long as I'm attacking the player with the most life or tied for the most life. So, it's going to happen from time to time. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. It'll just depend on if we have the highest life total. But since SG is going to start dealing out damage, it's probably likely that we have the most life total. But now from this point, you've just got 5/5s with double strike. I mean, unless somebody really removes their board, I think the truth is you just keep putting dragons in. Now it's something like Miirym, counter, draw, 6 to everybody. Miirym comes in, Tempest dealing 5 now to a target, and it gets haste, and still leaving up the mana for rapid, and we still just have dragons on dragons. I think that's the one thing this deck is going to do really well, is just putting dragons down and having your opponents deal with it. But let me know, what do you think of my upgrade for Eshki? I'd love to know what you think, and I will catch you on the